What if I told you that every time you fill your gas tank, you're helping sustain the most powerful financial system the world has ever seen? A system built not just on oil, but on trust, fear, and control. This is the story of how a secret deal between America and Saudi Arabia made the US dollar untouchable, and how that empire is now quietly being challenged. This is the Petrodollar Empire. To understand it, we have to go back to the ashes of World War II. The global economy was shattered, nations were bankrupt, currencies destroyed. In 1944, world leaders met in a small town called Bretton Woods. They made a simple deal. The US dollar would become the world's reserve currency, backed by gold. 1 ounce of gold was fixed at $35. Every nation's currency was tied to the dollar, and the dollar was tied to gold. America held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves. Everyone trusted it. For a time, the system worked. Trade flourished. The dollar was king. But by the 1960s, America was spending far beyond its means. Vietnam, the space race, massive social programs. Other countries began to wonder, could the US really back every dollar with gold? And in 1971, the answer came. President Richard Nixon announced that the US would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. With one stroke, the dollar was no longer backed by anything tangible. It became fiat, money created and sustained by confidence alone. But if the dollar was no longer backed by gold, what would keep the world using it? Without a new foundation, the global economy could collapse. Behind closed doors, Washington searched for a solution. And in 1974, it found one. The world's new foundation would not be gold, it would be oil. The early 1970s had already brought an oil shock. The Yom Kippur War triggered an embargo. Prices quadrupled. Gas lines snaked for miles. The economies faltered. In that chaos, US diplomats led by Henry Kissinger struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. America would guarantee the kingdom's security. In return, Saudi Arabia would sell its oil only in US dollars and invest its oil profits in US debt. Every barrel of oil in the world would now be priced in dollars. To buy energy, every nation first had to obtain dollars. That single agreement transformed oil into the new gold and cemented the dollar's global dominance. The petrodollar was born. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, this invisible empire expanded. Countries needed oil, so they needed dollars. To get dollars that they had to trade with or borrow from the United States, the demand for dollars seemed endless. America could print money, run deficits, and still live in prosperity because the world itself funded its spending. It financed the American dream and a global network of military and financial power, wars in the Middle East, interventions across the globe, and trillion-dollar defense budgets, all quietly supported by the petrodollar. Oil exporters recycled their profits back into US Treasury bonds, keeping interest rates low and credit flowing. Meanwhile, the dollar's supremacy turned Wall Street into the heart of global finance. Every international loan, trade deal, and reserve account revolved around the greenback. But power built on dependence breeds fragility. In the 2000s, cracks began to appear. China's rise created a new center of economic gravity. Russia sought independence from Western finance. After the 2008 financial crisis, trust in the US system wavered. The Federal Reserve printed trillions, and nations watched as the currency they relied on was inflated at will. Then came a new wave of challenges. Russia and China began settling oil trades in their own currencies. India experimented with rupee payments. Even Saudi Arabia, the cornerstone of the system, started accepting Chinese yuan for some energy deals. The petrodollar's once unquestioned dominance was no longer guaranteed, and US sanctions policy, cutting adversaries off from the dollar system, only accelerated the search for alternatives. When money becomes a weapon, others look for shields. Yet despite these tremors, the dollar remains deeply embedded. It still accounts for the majority of global reserves and transactions, because while alternatives exist, trust takes decades to build. For now, the world's financial bloodstream still flows through the Federal Reserve, but every empire faces the same question. How long can faith sustain power when the foundations begin to shift? The petrodollar gave America unmatched influence, but it also created complacency. It encouraged debt, consumerism, and dependence on perpetual global demand. As rivals form, new alliances, and digital currencies emerge, the next reserve system may look very different. Will it be another currency, a basket of global assets, or something entirely new, perhaps digital, decentralized, and borderless? No one knows. But history shows that monetary empires don't last forever. The British pound once ruled trade. Before that, gold and silver reigned. Each era ends when the world finds a new standard to believe in. The petrodollar may endure for decades or vanish faster than anyone expects. Its legacy will be clear: a world built on oil, paper, and trust. If you found this story revealing, share it, because understanding money is understanding power. This was the Petrodollar Empire. Subscribe for more stories that uncover the hidden forces shaping our world economy.